Well, you guys remember I was in this room about, God, it actually wasn't that long ago because of the coronavirus weird season that the NBA had, but I was in this room, bitching and moaning about the Celtics losing the NBA Eastern Conference Finals to the Miami Heat because, well, this. Hey, everybody, this is Bobby Gaines talking a little Boston Celtics basketball following another trade deadline. And I can't say nothing happened, because the Celtics did get Evan Fournier from the Orlando Magic. Of course, that wasn't the player they were targeting. I heard they were going to go for Aaron Gordon. I would have gone for Vucevic, who apparently got moved to Chicago. More on that in a second. But so the Celtics made a move, so I can't sit here and go, well, Danny didn't get anyone at the trade deadline. He technically did. And Fournier's actually not a bad player. Fournier, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but no, he's not a bad player. He'll make him better for the last 20 games or whatever's left, but yeah, your Boston Celtics are 23-23 at the time of this video. They've never really shown much all year. They've had a couple big wins. They beat the Bucks recently somehow. They show flashes that they can hang with those elite teams. Certainly with a duo like Tatum and Brown, you would think they would. But I never thought it was a given, and that's why I just thought it was so critical that you win that conference final series against Miami. Of course, anytime you make it to the conference finals, it's critical you win, but it was their time. And for all the people who wanted to say, oh, well, Boston will be back, Boston will be back, they're right there. Are they really, and have they been for a while? Because it seems like every time the Celtics are, they're on the rise. I've been hearing this for 6-7 years now. That's not even an exaggeration. I had to really think about it. How many years has it been that this was the Celtics' year, Before it was Cleveland, it was LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love, and, the Celtics, as good as they weren't going to get past them, but, they'd at least give it a darn good try. And that was good enough for Celtics fans. We made it to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years in a row, and, they lost in 7 games to Cleveland. At that point, that was when Kyrie was on the team, but he wasn't playing because he was injured. And, damn it, though, they were so close. They'll be back. And then, the next year they get blown out by the Bucks in the second round. And now you start looking around like, geez, the Bucks have a pretty talented team. The Nets went and got Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. And, this was last year before everything else even happened. And, so then last year, the Celtics surprised me, to be honest. I didn't think they'd even make the Eastern Conference Finals, but they did. And not against the Bucks, not against, any juggernaut, not even against the Raptors, who they actually beat in the semifinals. No. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat. And all due respect, the Miami Heat are maybe the third or fourth best team in the conference. And if the Celtics are supposedly here, and this is their time, they should have won that series. I'm sorry. Or at least they should have been more competitive than they were. Because it looked like they weren't in any of those games, even though they won a couple of them. The Heat, every time the Celtics made a move, the Heat were just that much better. And that was like the Heat's first time being there. So that's more the frustration, is that I'm watching these other teams climb over the Celtics in significantly less time. The Celtics did this little 5 or 6 year rebuilding plan that I was all for, as you guys remember. At first I was like, the Celtics aren't really going anywhere. And then I was like, okay, give them time. And, that starts to kind of fade away when I watch the Miami Heat basically just go on this great run and make it to the finals in, one season. No one saw that coming. And now they might be reloading again, getting Victor Oladipo. And that's the other thing I want to get to, is the aggressiveness of other teams. Other teams that aren't even necessarily in the championship conversation, but at least they're making moves to improve their team. And I just feel like the Celtics have this attitude like, we're all set, we're good, or, the team's not good enough to win a championship, so why bother? I just don't get that urgency from Danny Ainge. And I know, as an executive, you don't want to be too emotional and just make moves to make them, but, he's doing the opposite. He's just waiting for this perfect move that isn't going to happen. I know the Kyrie Irving trade, at the time we all thought it was a good trade. I guess it was, because they, did well for a couple of years, but, those deals don't come around that often where, they were able to trade Isaiah Thomas because his value was high. They traded a couple draft picks. So, in retrospect, I guess both teams just kind of got whatever out of that trade, but you got to make some deals. I'm sorry, and I mentioned Vucevic at the beginning of this video, who I think is a really good player for the Orlando Magic that got traded to the Chicago Bulls. Now, maybe I'm not as, knowledgeable with basketball as I am with baseball, but the Chicago Bulls aren't really going anywhere anytime soon in terms of the playoffs or championship expectations, but they made a move to make their team better. They traded players. They were involved in a trade that got them an all-star. And, even, the Denver Nuggets, who are actually a championship contender, they got Aaron Gordon. And this happens every year, every trading deadline. I feel like a few teams like the Timberwolves or the Blazers will jump in there and make a move where I'm like, oh, that's kind of surprising. Never the Celtics, though. The Celtics always just sit there. Whether they're really good or really bad, they just sit there at the trade deadline and just let it come and go. And I'm like, why? Like, why not even just take a flyer on some of these guys? Like, Andre Drummond just got picked up by the Lakers. You know, DeMarcus Cousins has been available a few times. Trevor Ariza. I know these aren't, like, all-star names that make you, like, immediately better. But, like, just take a flyer. Like, who do you have on the team right now? You got Tatum and Brown. You know, Marcus Smart, if he's not injured. You know, you have some decent players. Kemba Walker's supposedly... You know, he hasn't been as advertised. Hayward and Horford took off. Something happened there. But I'm saying, like, on the Celtics team, outside of those two young guys, like, yeah, you have some decent pieces, but it's starting to feel like the Celtics are just spinning their wheels now. It feels like the last 5 years it's been, okay, you know, we can count on these young guns and, you know, add a couple veterans around them and we're good to go. And even if that did work, which it kind of did, like, that's not enough. And when you see your opponents doing other things, like even the Lakers, who have, like, a loaded team already, they keep adding players. Like, every other team seems to think they need to add somebody, except the Celtics. The Celtics seem like, no, we're good. We're where we want to be. Well, you're not. You know, and if you were, you would have won at least one of these conference finals that you've been in the last 5 years. You know, particularly the one last year, which was gift wrapped to you. So... the Celtics aren't playing like a team that's desperate to win a championship. They're playing like a team that's either already won one or they just don't think they're going to win one, so why bother? Like, that's the impression I'm getting. And then I look at the Brooklyn Nets, and that to me is the most curious and in a way infuriating case. Because the Brooklyn Nets, you know, of course, were the team that the Celtics, you know, fleeced. You know, they took advantage of them 5 or 6 years ago when they made that trade with Pierce and Garnett and Jason Terry, whoever. They traded a bunch of players to the Nets. The Nets traded them a couple players, but more importantly, like 3 first-round picks unprotected. So the Celtics, you know, were able to turn that into Tatum and Brown and, in a way, Kyrie Irving, because they traded one of those picks. So, you know, the Celtics got better in the future. The Nets made a short-sighted, dumb trade, you know, whatever. They blew it up. The Nets were terrible for a few years. And, you know, it was like, okay, well, the Celtics are coming along and the Nets are going the other way. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Nets have Kyrie Irving, the Nets have Kevin Durant, and the Nets have James Harden. And they just got LaMarcus Aldridge off the buyout market. So the team that we were all laughing at and mocking, you know, oh, it's going to be years before they're good again. They're good again. And they're really good again. They could contend for an NBA championship this year. So, you know, it's nice to make these cute little moves and get your little draft picks and, you know, move up in the standings year by year, but what has it really gotten us as Celtics fans? I'm just asking, because, you know, I'm getting to the point now, like last year I was angry, you know, when they lost in the conference finals. I'm getting to the point now where I'm just apathetic. You know, like honestly, I've seen, you know, the 76ers have rebuilt themselves. The Bucks have always been good, and maybe, you know, they haven't won anything yet, but they, you know, they got the Greek Freak. They can't count them out. The Heat have stepped up, you know. It just seems like more teams are getting better than worse, and the Celtics are just kind of status quo. And, you know, in the West, you got the Clippers, Lakers, Mavericks could be a threat. Phoenix has stepped up. So it's like all these teams are acquiring players, you know, even if they're veterans or whatever, they're taking a shot. And the Celtics aren't even taking a shot. They're just sitting on the bench, chucking up their threes and just whatever. And at a certain point, I just become apathetic. It's not even that I'm angry. I'm just like, you know what? They don't really want to win. Why do I want to watch them? Like, why do I want to watch a team that's okay being 500 at this point in the season and adding, you know, Evan Fournier's like their big move? Okay, that's good, but... And also, by the way, that's like their only move in the last 5 trade deadlines. Like, if they made a move like that every year, maybe I wouldn't care that much. Like, if they acquired a player like Evan Fournier every year, like a decent player, I'd say, okay, yeah, take a shot. But this is their only move that they've made. They haven't acquired anyone of that talent. Usually they get like a backup point guard at the trade deadline or something. But no, I'm just disappointed. You know, and the Nets, you know, are already pretty much rebuilt. So, you know, what have the Celtics really done, basically? How do you grade this rebuild? And coming from 2013 when the Celtics were trash to right now where they're kind of trash again, to be perfectly honest. I mean, 500 is not a great record. You know, making the playoffs as a 6 seed isn't really, you know, a good season. That's what we wanted to avoid, supposedly. You know, when the Celtics did the rebuild, it was, well, you know, better to blow it up than to, you know, be a middling team who can't make it past the second round of the playoffs. Oh, you mean like right now? Because that's what they feel like. And, you know, could they get better? Maybe. But, you know, the Nets aren't going anywhere, at least in the short term. You know, the Knicks might be getting better. Sixers will be good for a while. And it just feels like the Celtics, I don't want to say their window's closed, because their window could easily be extended if they keep getting guys, but they're just not doing it. So, we'll see what happens. This season they could surprise me again, make a good little playoff run, but this may or may not be my only rant about the Celtics, because like I said, they haven't given me a lot to care about. This is just a rant about how little I care about them. So, let's go Celtics. We'll see how it plays out. Be interested to know your thoughts in the comments below. Go C's. Ew.